Hi everyone, welcome to week 2 of the VGC Casters Cup. This week I'm up against the United Kingambits, piloted by Farid, aka Tomahawk UK. Now Farid's got a kind of a range-centric team of Archaludon, Tornadus, Serena and Barraskewda, and then there's some supporters like Incineroar and Grimmsnarl that focuses on reducing damage, and the Garganacl that focuses on chipping away at the opponents with residual damage. So immediately off the bat, the Pokemon that I am most scared of is the Archaludon and Tornadus. I don't have my own weather, and I can see the Archaludon, quickly spiraling out of control with electro shots and stamina boosts. So I have to be very careful, especially with a Urshifu, that I don't give it an immediate, +3 in defense if it swaps in on a Pokemon that I attempt to Surging Strikes. So with that being said, let's take a look at the team that I built against Farid. So first, we've got Terra Electric Urshifu. This is because I'm very scared of an Archaludon and Tornadus lead, and with Terra Electric, I will at least resist the Bleak Wind Storms and the Electro Shots. Now, Urshifu doesn't take Draco Meteors very, very well. So, if the Archaludon does go for the Draco Meteor immediately, I could be in some trouble. This is why I have this EV spread. Against a modest 252 Archaludon, I believe it was something like an 87% chance to survive. And then the speed EVs were just to guarantee that I always outspeed 252 neutral Archaludon. Of course, a timid 252 Archaludon can outspeed this Urshifu, but then I'm not scared of a timid Archaludon, and I don't really expect anyone to be running that anyway. Now, this Urshifu set has 2 fighting moves, Surging Strikes and Detect actually, shouldn't be Protect here, but Surging Strikes and Detect are pretty much standard on a regular non-choiced Urshifu set. I had Drain Punch over Aqua Jet because, one, I feel like against Serena, I can't really Aqua Jet anyway, and for his team, it's fairly bulky, so I didn't feel that Aqua Jet would be that beneficial. So I ended up going with Drain Punch because I don't really like the idea of a non-Focus Sash Urshifu having close combat, because you're dropping your own defenses after the close combat, and given how bulky Farid's team is, I don't think the Urshifu can actually KO anything with it. So I wanted the Drain Punch just as extra longevity, and the close combat is just there as a fighting type nuke. Next up, we've got Heatran. Now you'll notice this is a Flame Body Heatran set. This is because Farid doesn't have any fire type Pokemon on his team, so I figured the odds of me getting hit by a fire type move is pretty low, and given how many physical attackers he's got, I thought that it would be beneficial to change Heatran to a more physically defensive set. Now this Heatran does have Body Press and Iron Defense, just to even take advantage further of the fact that I have a fairly defensive team, and with Terra Bug, there's really not much that a Farid can use to hit this Heatran with. Of course, the Bleak Wind Storm from Tornadus can hit Heatran for super effective, but I've also got a Ting, and Farid's going to have to rely on an 85% accurate move as well. And the idea for this team, at least this week, is basically get rid of the Tornadus, and then the Heatran can essentially just set up with Iron Defenses and Body Press away. And yeah, this Heatran is not going to care about parting shots from Incineroar because that doesn't reduce the defense. I can't quite remember now what this Heatran's EVs were supposed to do. I think the defense was to guarantee survival from Body Press from a +2 Archaludon. I can't actually remember. It was a long time ago that I made the set, so I'm just going to trust my past self and believe that this set works. Next up, we've got Torracat, and this is Budget Incineroar. Now, Torracat doesn't get quite as many moves as its older brother Incineroar does, so it doesn't get Snarl and it doesn't get Knockoff, but it's still got some other fairly useful support moves. So this Torracat does have the Sunny Day because I'm a little bit afraid of the Tornado setting up rain and then the Archaludon just spiraling out of control with electro shots. So that's what the Sunny Day is for. And the Terra Dark, because A, it's kind of funny being, a Terra Dark type. Once it evolves, it will become the Dark type. And it's also, I'm going to be immune to any taunts from a Prankster Tornadus. The set, from memory, I think that's to survive a +2 Archaludon body press as well. I can't actually, actually, I think it was to survive a Life Orb Wave Crash from the Barraskewda in the rain after an Intimidate. I think that's what it was for. But yeah, I do recall calculating against Life Orb Barraskewdas just in case Fareed brought that. Next up, we've got Assault Vest Raichu. For those of you who have been around VGC for a very long time, and by that I mean 10 years, you will probably recognize this Raichu as the Raichu that won Worlds in 2016, piloted by Wolf Glick on that Mega Rayquaza and Primal Kyogre team. This Raichu has exactly the same EVs because, hey, if it ain't broke, I'm not going to bother trying to fix it, and found that the EVs worked just fine. The only minor change I made to Wolf's Raichu set was swapping out the Volt Switch for the Thunderbolt, and that's because I didn't actually want Raichu to leave the field, I wanted it to stay on the field, but everything else is exactly the same. And Terra Fairy just to be extra immune to Archaludons, but that does mean I will take super effective damage from Flash Cannon, so I do have to be careful. Next up, we've got Ting Lu. Now, Ting Lu, don't laugh at this set, it's a little funny. The cover cloak is just so that my Ting Lu can always win a 1v1 against Garganacl. Garganacl is kind of annoying for my team. I've got my two of my strongest attackers, Urshifu and Heatran, take 1/8 damage from Assault Cure. This Ting Lu is a Fissure and a Stomping Tantrum set. The idea being, Fareed's team is fairly bulky, but I think that once I can neutralize the damage from both the Tornadus and the Archaludon, I can essentially sit around on the field for a very long time, and Fissure, even if I miss, that means Stomping Tantrum's move power doubles, and that's quite useful then because 2 turns of Stomping Tantrum is equivalent to 1 turn of a previously failed move. So basically the Fissure is just there to as like a bonus attack, and if I miss, it's okay. And the payback is there because this is a very slow Ting Lu. Most of Fareed's team is probably going to be faster than my Ting Lu, so I will get double damage with the payback. And it's Terra Poison because that's just a really nice defensive typing against Fareed's team. He doesn't have too many strong ground and psychic type attackers, and no, Hypno does not count as a psychic type attacker. Next up, we've got Yuxi, the final member of the team, and actually I think this Yuxi, the item is wrong. It should be, this is a leftover from last week's set. So Yuxi is Mental Herb just in case the Tornadus went for the taunt, and the idea behind this Yuxi set is that turn 1, if Fareed leads Archaludon and Tornadus, I can skill swap away the Prankster, and then the next turn I've got Prankster Sunny Day and I can just take away the rain and help out my own team members. And of course, it is a bit anti-synergistic with the Urshifu, but at least it's manual weather, so I think I can time it properly. And I think this Yuxi set is actually not quite correct. I can't actually remember what... Oh no, I think no, it's the exact set because I think I just ended up using the Yuxi from last week and swapping out some moves. Although I may have... Yeah, actually, I'm not entirely sure the EVs are correct because this week there was no need for some speed, but I don't actually remember what I ended up going with. It was... I think I ended up going with like a calm set. But yeah, don't quote me on it, I'll find out eventually. But essentially, Yuxi is just there to be very annoying and be disruptive with all those yawns. So with that being said, let's get into our game. And also, before we get into the game actually, I just want to put a disclaimer out there. The game was actually recorded after the staff dinner at Birmingham Regionals because Fareed and I were both casting there. And because we were playing in the hotel lobby, I didn't really, well, we were sitting opposite each other, so I didn't exactly want to commentate my thoughts as we were playing, because then Farid could hear exactly what I was clicking. So the game is just recorded, and I'm just going to commentate over that game once we get into that replay. So enjoy! Unfortunately, I messed up my audio settings as well, so there's no music, and I've just added a remix of some of the Pokemon music that I like into this, just so that it's not complete and utter silence when you're watching the video. So let us begin. And yeah, I might fast forward. No need to fast forward. Okay, so looking at Farid's team, he brought pretty much the Pokemon that I expected him to bring, and I just ended up going with my default leads, which was Urshifu and Raichu. I think actually at the time I initially selected Yuxi and Heatran because I felt like it was a really obvious, I mean, Urshifu Raichu was kind of a very obvious lead for me, but ultimately I felt that it was still very safe. So you can see I'm really deliberating over the Pokemon to bring here. I've got a good, 40 or so seconds left, and for this game one, yeah, you can see me basically cycling through every Pokemon and then changing my mind in the last 30 minutes to go with the Urshifu Raichu lead, which for me I think it's a very safe lead for Urshifu, and then with the Ting and the Torracat in the back. And now that I'm ready, I think, yeah, my game plan was basically use Urshifu to chip away at Farid's Pokemon, and then have Torracat and Ting in the back to clean up, hopefully after everything has been chipped. So now we get into our game, and Farid is going to be leading with the Serena and the Grimmsnarl, which was not what I was expecting. Now I know immediately I cannot go for the Fake Out onto the Serena because of its Queenie Majesty ability, but that doesn't stop me from going for a Nuzzle onto the Serena and hopefully get the paralysis. Even if I don't get the paralysis, my Urshifu isn't really in danger of getting knocked out at all. I do go for the Terra Grass because I don't think Farid has anything that can OHKO my Urshifu once it goes for the, sorry, not Terra Grass, Terra Electric. So there's my Urshifu, just keeping itself nice and safe, and Raichu gets a Nuzzle off and paralyzes the Serena. But then the Serena reveals its Lumberry, which is extremely odd for me. At the time this happened, I still hadn't quite figured out what was happening. But Urshifu goes next, does get its Surging Strikes off, but unfortunately this Grimmsnarl is holding the Rocky Helmet, which I did not clock at all. So Urshifu unfortunately ends up taking a huge amount of recoil there. But it does get the Grimmsnarl fairly low, and the Serena is going to target the Raichu with a Power Whip, which it does manage to survive, but unfortunately a double up onto the Raichu knocks it out from that Grimmsnarl. So Raichu is down. I'm not in the best position, but I also know that Torracat coming in against two physical attackers is going to be quite nice. And now Torracat also cannot go for the Fake Out, but it does heavily threaten that Serena, and the Grimmsnarl is also in range of getting knocked out by another Surging Strikes. Now, the Urshifu, if it does target the Grimmsnarl, will be taking really heavy recoil damage, but at this point I really just wanted that Grimmsnarl off the field. It looks like actually Serena does not want to hang around at all, and is going to allow the Incineroar to come in, which of course the Urshifu isn't going to care one bit, but I did wish that I had gone for a Flare Blitz onto the Grimmsnarl and a Surging Strikes onto the Urshifu. But no matter, the Grimmsnarl goes for the Scary Face, and actually I did not go for the Flare Blitz, I just realized I went for the Parting Shot out of the way, and I get myself a free switch on to the Ting Lu. And now going into this next turn, Ting Lu does have the covered cloak, so it is not going to care about the Intimidate. Now Urshifu of course does follow up with that final surging strikes to knock out the Grimmsnarl. Unfortunately, Urshifu is really heavily chipped, but Ting Lu on the field is in quite a nice position now. Of course, if the Serena does come back, which it does, that Power Whip is going to really threaten the Ting Lu. Ting Lu, of course, can survive the Power Whip, and because of the covered cloak, it's not afraid of a Fake Out, but it still doesn't enjoy taking a super effective base 120 power grass move. And this is where I contemplate sending in the Torracat, one to burn out the Fake Out, and also to get another important attack drop onto that Serena. So it's Torracat versus Incineroar, a very what's the word? Ironic situation. Anyway, Incineroar goes for the Torracat with a Fake Out, so that does absorb it very nicely, and that Intimidate does have a great meaningful impact, but unfortunately the fissure from the Ting Lu, I think at this point, having really no offense, the Ting Lu wasn't really doing too much. But it also means that because the Ting Lu has missed the fissure, Stomping Tantrum is base a 120 power. Now, the Torracat also heavily threatens the Serena once again, and having not been intimidated, it is going to be exerting a lot of pressure onto it, so I just clicked the super effective Flare Blitz move onto it and went for the Stomping Tantrum, I believe, onto the Incineroar. But anyway, Farid makes a fairly good play of going for the Terrestrialization onto the Serena. So Serena is now going to resist the Flare Blitz from my Torracat. Now Serena is a pretty squishy Pokemon overall, so I think it'll still do some decent damage to it, and it actually deals absolutely no damage to that Serena. So it's looking a little bit dire right now, but I do get bailed out by a Power Whip miss. Incineroar, of course, does Parting Shot its way out of the field, which, you know, Incineroar doing what Incineroar does best. But there's a base 120 powered Stomping Tantrum coming off next, and that Archaludon is going to be the recipient of that. So that Stomping Tantrum is going to hit very hard, and that does a very good amount of damage. Unfortunately, it does give the Archaludon a defense boost, and at this point I'm not in a very good position here, which is why I go for the Protect. Now, if the Archaludon, I don't know what the item is, but if it's Power Herb and it goes for something like the Electro Shot onto my Torracat, that's going to be quite problematic, especially if I say swap out the Torracat onto the Urshifu. So here, Torracat isn't really that useful, and I also want to keep it around for another turn, which is why I try to go a little bit more defensive here with a Protect and a Parting Shot onto this Serena. If the Serena predicts this, or if Farid predicts this and doubles into the Torracat slot, that's going to be quite disastrous for me because I have no offense. But anyway, I do manage to drop the Serena down to -2 attack, so it shouldn't do too much, but Urshifu, of course, is quite frail. Luckily, the Power Whip does go off into the Ting Lu, and then also, luckily, the Draco Meteor also goes into the Ting Lu, so that was a really good turn for me. And what's even better now is that I know that Farid has gone for the Terrestrialization. He cannot Terrestrialize the Archaludon out of that Fighting type weakness, so I can go for the Close Combat onto it. Now, my worry at this point was that there could potentially be an Incineroar switch-in to get the Intimidate onto this Urshifu, and Close Combat from a -1 Urshifu is not going to knock out the Incineroar, so I contemplated going for the Surging Strikes, or maybe a Close Combat onto the Serena just to remove it off the field. But ultimately I decided that the Archaludon was far too big of a threat, and I would rather get some guaranteed damage down onto it. send in the Torracat once again to get a third round of Intimidate. And luckily, yes, the Archaerodon does get felled by this close combat. And next up will then be the Serena, and at this point, if the Serena hits the Urshifu, I don't think it's going to survive. But looks like the Power Whip is going to miss once again, so Urshifu does manage to survive this turn with the -1 defense. Now that Fareed's down to his final 2 Pokemon, I know that I can go for a very safe Protect onto this Urshifu just to burn the Fake Out turn, and Torracat can't Protect, but it's also not really threatened at all by anything from Fareed's side. Now, the downside is Torracat can't actually attack. So anyway, Urshifu does go for the Detect to burn the Fake Out, and allows the Torracat to get another parting shot off onto this Serena. So Serena is now at -4 attack, which means I believe the Urshifu should be able to survive an attack now, especially if the Torracat comes back in. But anyway, the Ting does come back in, and because the Incineroar didn't go for the Fake Out, it's gone for an attack, and we'll see the reveal of what happens. But the Power Whip does go off into the Urshifu, so a nice little Protect there. And Incineroar also doubles up into the Urshifu with a low kick, so that was a really nice turn, but the low kick is not something I want to see for the Ting Lu, because Ting Lu is going to take a lot of damage from this low kick. But at this point, I do have the Torracat in the back that's fairly healthy and can drop another Intimidate off, and I'm feeling kind of okay about my position here because the Surging Strikes from the Urshifu is going to knock out this Incineroar. So Torracat comes back in, drops the Incineroar down to -1 and Serena down to -5. And the Surging Strikes comes out, which I am very, very happy about until this Incineroar eats its Citrus Berry. So yeah, very poor preparation on my part because I completely forgot that the Incineroar could be holding a Citrus Berry, and because of that, it actually survives this turn, which is not good for me. Serena does follow up with a knockoff, gets rid of the Mystic Water as well. At this point, didn't really matter, but the double up of the low kick onto the Urshifu means that I'm down to my final 2 Pokemon, neither of which have any real offensive output. That being said, the Incineroar is heavily damaged, and I'm wondering with the Serena at -5 attack, I might just be able to clutch it out if I'm lucky with the Power Whip misses. So anyway, Ting Lu goes for the Protect just to buy myself another turn because I have a feeling that the Incineroar is going to go down to another turn, 2 turns of Flare Blitz, and I think the Torracat can probably survive a double up at this point. Anyway, so Ting Lu goes for the Protect, and Fareed makes a very good play. But first, okay, the Flare Blitz comes off, so yeah, does about half of Incineroar's remaining health, and I'm feeling pretty confident it can get the knockout. But Serena unfortunately does knock off my Eviolite. In fact, it's a double up of the Eviolite, and Torracat's still fairly healthy, but now that Torracat is the fastest Pokemon on the field, I'm pretty confident it can knock out the Incineroar, so I just need to get lucky with some Power Whip misses there. Incineroar goes down to the Flare Blitz, and now the Ting Lu, actually the Serena first, is going to attack. It does manage to connect the super effective Power Whip, but you see how impactful the Intimidates were. The Fissure, unfortunately, does not hit the Serena, and at this point I'm in a pretty dire position because Flare Blitz, we saw how much damage it did to the Serena earlier. It did absolutely nothing. So at this point I'm wondering maybe instead of going for Fissure, I should go for something else. Serena does wisely try to waste all my Fissure PPs with a Protect, but I did not go for the Fissure this turn. I went for the Payback, sorry, not the Payback, the Stomping Tantrum. And so it's the next turn, and at this point I'm really just a little bit worried about how I'm supposed to get rid of this Serena. I decided to try, well, firstly, Torracat is going to get the final parting shot onto this Serena, just to drop its attack down to -6 now. So this Serena is not really going to do any damage, except for a critical hit. Power Whip does come off, and you can see how good all those attack drops are, but the payback actually surprisingly does quite a lot, and I'm over here kicking myself over not having used payback earlier, but this payback puts me in a very nice position because Serena, from the looks of it, only has single target attacks. It could potentially knock out the Ting with the Power Whip, but it's at this point that the Torracat can 2-hit KO with the Flare Blitz, and yeah, you see how much damage that does, and I'm feeling pretty confident. So Serena uses a knockoff actually onto the Torracat. I'm not too sure why, but the payback does manage to KO the Serena and give me game 1. So I'm feeling very happy about that, and for game 2, I'm probably not going to bring the Raichu again, I think, because it just wasn't doing very much. Alright, so now for this game 2, I'm definitely not going to bring the Raichu. That was my first thought. I think Urshifu is still quite useful there, but in this game 2, I'm actually starting to think about setting up the Heatran with the body press iron defense. I can't see how I'm going to be punished for this. So yeah, it's still a bit of a... I mean, Fareed's team is very bulky, and I'm not entirely sure what his strategy is, but I figured I'm pretty safe with the Yuxi Heatran lead. I don't see how he can get the KO. And in the back, I definitely want the Torracat because of how good it was in that last match. I definitely think that it was the main contributing factor, even though it didn't really take many KOs. I mean, it did KO the Incineroar, but I'm feeling pretty confident about this lead. Once the Heatran is set up, then I can just start body pressing everything. And with Ting and in Torracat to support the Heatran, I don't see how I can be punished. So we jump into game 2. And this game 2, once the leads are revealed, you can see that Fareed led with the exact same Pokemon as last time. So immediately, I'm feeling like I'm in a pretty good position here. I can start going for those Yawns, or maybe swap out into the Torracat, but ultimately I decided to swap out into the Torracat to get that attack drop onto both the Serena and the Grimmsnarl. And here is a very comfortable body press coming up. Or so I thought, but here is the swagger, and I finally realized what that Lumberry was for on the Serena. So the Serena now, thanks to the Intimidate and the swagger, is going to be at +1 attack, and then it goes for the low kick onto my Heatran and just knocks it out in one hit before I even get the chance to get anything off. So that was about as disastrous of a turn 1 as I could get, because now I have lost the only mode of damage on my team. The Torracat can't do anything to the Serena if it goes for the Terra Water. The Yuxi has, I mean, it's got mystical power, so it could, do something, but it can't hit the Grimmsnarl. That's Dark type. So at this point, I'm really at a loss, and I'm already thinking about the game 3 and how I can win. Now the Grimmsnarl does go for the parting shot, which I'm quite happy about because the Yuxi wasn't doing any damage anyway, and I was going for the Yawn. And in comes the, I believe it was the Incineroar from memory. I'll have have to see. I think Farid's taking some time to think about what he's sending in. Yep, it's the Incineroar. So that is going to be hit with a Yawn later on. He drops the Intimidate onto both Torracat and Yuxi, but at this point, doesn't really matter. It's not like I'm doing any damage anyway. I do get the Yawn off, which means that if Farid chooses to stay in and go for the fake out, he is going to be put to sleep. Anyway, Torracat yeets its way out of there with a parting shot. And Ting Lu is going to come in. I'm feeling fairly confident that Farid's not going to power whip that slot because that's a pretty risky move to make. Anyway, it does go for a knockoff, which does a lot of damage. I guess, you know, at +1, it is going to hit quite hard. And Yuxi loses the Mental Herb, which at this point I don't actually mind because the Mental Herb was just there for the taunt from Tornadus. Now Ting Lu's in a pretty awful position here as well, but it is Terra Poison, so I'm thinking about going for the Terastallization at this point, just to make sure that I'm not taking super effective damage from those power whips. But it's honestly, it's a pretty dire position that I'm in right now, and I think ultimately I opted to protect and swap in the Torracat to just refresh the Intimidate and also make sure that I have, you know, a healthier Pokemon next turn, and also I can start going for those Intimidate cycles. Serena does withdraw for something else in the back. I'm wondering at this point, does Farid also recall his Incineroar? Archaludon comes in though, which I'm very, very happy about because I did not attack it. And the Incineroar stays in and goes for the low kick onto the Ting Lu, which I am extremely happy about because now it is now put to sleep by the Yawn. And now I'm at this point where I'm not really doing any damage, and Farid's got way more damage potential than I do, and honestly, my out is Fissure. So you gotta play to your outs. So that's what I ended up going for. And I think at this point, if I can somehow use the Ting Lu to connect all the fissures, then the Torracat and the Yuxi can keep the Ting Lu safe by spamming parting shots and yawns. Torracat once again gets out of there. You know, it's a much speedier version of Incineroar, so it's giving Incineroar a taste of its own medicine. Yuxi comes back in. The Draco Meteor does connect with the Yuxi, but thanks to Ting Lu and Yuxi's natural bulk, it does survive that quite handily, and also means that Archaludon isn't really a big threat, and I hit the Fissure onto this Archaludon, which means a massive threat is suddenly gone, and all of a sudden I am feeling extremely good about my chances. Well, I'm not feeling extremely good, but obviously I still have to get through the Serena and the Grimmsnarl, but neither the Incineroar nor the Grimmsnarl can actually do very much to my Ting Lu. So I send in the Torracat once again, but here I actually make a massive blunder by skill swapping Levitate onto the Grimmsnarl. The reason why I went for this is because I was trying to take away those prankster scary faces and the parting shots, but in hindsight that was completely meaningless because everything on my team is so slow anyway, and by giving Grimmsnarl the Levitate I can't actually touch it. So there's me blundering away my chances of a win by giving the Grimmsnarl Levitate. I completely forgot my Yuxi had Levitate was the reason why, but luckily, oh wait, no, Spirit Break does go off onto the Yuxi, so Yuxi does go down. Grimmsnarl is a pretty, you know, offensive Pokemon. Anyway, Incineroar does stay asleep for another turn, which is nice. But now I'm in a pretty tricky position because the Ting Lu can't touch the Grimmsnarl anymore thanks to the Grimmsnarl having a Levitate. And yeah, I'm at a loss as to what I can do. Farid also hasn't gone for the Terastallization, so he could very easily terrestrialize the Incineroar out of the Stomping Tantrum. At this point, I'm wondering if he's going to swap out the Incineroar for the Serena. So I double into the Incineroar with a combination of Stomping Tantrum and Flare Blitz, and I also feel a little bit uncomfortable about the Grimmsnarl going for the Spirit Break, which is why I terrestrialized into the Poison type. But it looks like Incineroar actually is going to opt to stay in and go for the Terra Grass to get rid of that ground type weakness. But that's very, very good for me because Torracat went for the Flare Blitz onto that slot. Anyway, so Ting Lu goes for the Terra Poison, so it's now no longer at a risk of getting knocked out by a combination of a Low Kick and Spirit Break. Flare Blitz does come off onto the Incineroar, does a very, very good amount of damage onto it. And then the Grimmsnarl, well actually no, the Citrus Berry actually is going to activate onto this Incineroar first. And here I get completely bailed out there. Grimmsnarl going for the Parting Shot means that it's going to lose the Levitate weakness. So actually, after I blundered away my win condition, luckily for me, my opponent also made a misplay, and Serena is now on the field, and Incineroar takes its third turn of sleep, I believe, but allows the Stomping Tantrum. At -1, yeah, you can see how ineffective that is. Anyway, Torracat now can also heavily threaten the Serena. At this point, Terra Grass Incineroar, I'm not too sure what I can do, but the Flare Blitz from Torracat does come out and is not going to be able to knock out the Serena just yet. But the knockoff now also comes off into Torracat, so Torracat is going to lose the Eviolite, which is going to be quite annoying. Incineroar also wakes up this turn and goes for the Parting Shot, so my Torracat does luckily manage to survive this turn, and the Grimmsnarl is going to come right back in. And I did target that slot with the Fissure, and a Fissure connecting would be very nice, which it does. So there's the Grimmsnarl down. Me robbing another KO off of Farid there. Grimmsnarl just goes down instantly to the Fissure. So I've hit 2 out of I think the 3 fissures I've clicked in this game. Incineroar is of course forced back into this game. Now I'm also in a bit of a tricky position here because the Torracat cannot protect. So there's a very easy fake out and power whip or some other attack coming off into the Torracat, and that's exactly what Farid does. Torracat of course doesn't get that turn to attack, so it gets knocked out by the knockoff, and it's now just Ting Lu versus the world. Ting Lu goes for the payback this turn, and luckily for me, because the Serena is in such a low range, it does get knocked out. But now it's at a point of Ting Lu versus Incineroar, and at -2 attack, this Ting Lu has 0 offensive pressure outside of the Fissure. The knockoff comes off, it's now neutral target, so it's going to do quite a bit. And Fissure does, well, it misses the Incineroar. So basically my win con for this game is to hit 1 of the 5 remaining Fissures that I have. And it's looking a little bit dire here. Incineroar goes for another knockoff, and that's still going to do some decent damage. Fissure misses again, which is not a surprise. But that's my only win con, so I'm gonna have to go for it. Another knockoff comes out, and that is a critical hit, which actually chips away quite heavily. And at this point, if I can't connect my fissures, my Ting Lu might actually just go down to knockoff damage. Knockoff comes off again, and I just go for the payback here just to see how much damage I do, and yeah, that is nowhere near enough. So another knockoff comes out. Ting Lu, I think, can actually survive, but I hit another fissure, so yeah, that is the game. I hit 3 fissures in one game, and I very unjustly got the win from Farid there. So that was my week 2 game. I am not proud of how I won, but a win is a win, and it is quite hilarious. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that match.